Hi there! Welcome back to the Emporium Threads YouTube channel. My name is Ray, and today we're going to be talking about a new product that we are launching on the website. By the time you see this video, it will be available to you at emporiumthreads.com. It is our zipper template. Today I'm going to be showcasing the number 3 size in the fluorescent pink. However, this is also available in a couple of other colors, as well as a number 5 size template. So when I was developing this template, I thought back about my experiences with my bag making journey. Welt pockets or inset zipper pockets can seem very challenging, maybe even a little bit frightening, and frankly, once you get to know how to do them, they're just tedious. I wanted to design a template that would help take all the guesswork out of making these types of pockets and make it just a quicker, simpler process that I knew right off the bat it was going to work every single time. With a normal inset or welt pocket, you use the measurements that are given to you on the pattern for that, or you make up your own based on bag making experience. But you've got to remember every single time how wide exactly you're going to make it and the differences in the horizontal spacing versus if you're using number 3 zipper tape or number 5 zipper tape. So that's where this template comes in. I have a couple of go-to sizes that are my perfect sizing for all different types of bags, and that's what I've included for you here on this template. So on the number 3 size template, there are 3 boxes here that you'll see, and there's also a circle hole. So first things first, all of the edges are completely straight and crisp, precision cut. We also have some nice engraving of some text on here and some centering and different lines on here to help you line your template up. We also have the hole right here, which is simply just a hanging hole. You probably want to avoid using these strips to hang just because you don't want to mess up your template, so we included the handy hanging hole here. On this template, you're going to find the 3 slots here, all with a corresponding number next to them. Each of those numbers corresponds to the size of the pocket and what it will be when you are finished. So up here on top, we have the 9.5 inch pocket, a really nice large size pocket that's great for totes or big bags such as the Trailblazer or the Balazza tote bag, where you have an inset pocket. The 9.5 size is also fantastic for horizontal, not just horizontal, but for vertical pockets that you would put on, say, a backpack. The middle size slot we have here is a 7.5 inch size. That is my go-to for all bags. It's great for larger bags if you just don't want a huge pocket, but you want a good usable pocket. But it's also great for medium-sized backpacks like the Guardian backpack or the Meraki backpack from Bagstock. And the Guardian would be the one from Linds Handmade. That's a little bit on the larger size, but again, the 7.5 inch pocket, that'd be perfect if you want to sneak an extra pocket somewhere in on that bag. The 5.5 inch size here on the bottom was actually really important to me because if you make small bags, I like a good pocket and I like a zippered pocket for security. But occasionally when I am making one of these bags, I think, ooh, I want to sneak a pocket in here. How small can I go before too small is too small? If you have ever made a pocket too small, you know what I'm talking about. You've either bought a bag with a pocket that was too small or you accidentally sewed one yourself that was too small and then you went, ooh, I can't get my hand in there, especially if it's a deep pocket, which can be frustrating. So I specifically developed this size, the 5.5. It's the perfect size for a small pocket. It's still large enough to get a hand in. It's large enough to be able to move a typical cell phone in and out of, maybe even a small wallet, but it's not too small. If you go any smaller than 5.5, you certainly can, but in my experience, I just find it's not good. You really want to stay 5.5 or larger. So those are the 3 sizes that are included on this template. So you can just slap this puppy down, trace it out. I'm going to show you exactly how to use this, and then you can just bing, bing, boom, done with your pocket. It takes all the guesswork out. It makes it quick and easy, and oh my gosh, you're just going to be amazed at how much of the tediousness it removes from this process. Also, if you're new to inset or welt pockets, learning this way, it's going to be way easier for you than having to measure out all those little lines and connect the triangles and do all of that, right? There are so many processes to a typical welt or inset pocket. This takes out like 2/3 of those steps. So I am going to show you how to use this on a bag today. All right, so I've got just a few tools here that we're gonna need to make to use our zipper template and make our inset pocket. So I have a little pin cushion here with some pins. I've got a small ruler just for lining things up and making sure it's straight. I have any old regular kind of clicky style pen, like a big pen or whatever. I have a piece of quilter's cotton. If you have thin cotton, you may need to interface this. This is a thick, kind of stiff, harder cotton. I don't need to interface this for my pocket. I also have my lining piece here, or excuse me, my exterior piece for my bag where this pocket's gonna go, but for you, this could be a lining piece or whatever piece you're putting your pocket onto. And then I have my number 3 size template because I'm using a number 3 size zipper. In the end of this, what we're gonna end up making is this sling, this H2Go tumbler sling, which is from Linds Handmade Design. You can find them on Facebook. They're also on Etsy or at lindshandmadedesigns.com, I believe, but I will link you that website below to get this pattern. This is a hacked version of this bag with a zipper pocket in this style instead of the rounded traditional zipper pocket that you see with all the card slots and all of that. And it also has a boxed bottom instead of the rounded bottom, which is what is traditionally available. But again, I will link you to that pattern. Just remember, this is a hacked version of it. So I've got my piece here that my pocket is going onto, but I'm gonna set that aside for now. So I have my piece of quilter's cotton here, and I've got my template. I'm gonna go ahead and line this up. All of my edges on the template are straight. That's one thing that's really important to note. We precision cut these here in-house, all of the pieces, so they're done by a laser and they're very, very straight as it could possibly be. They're also engraved, so you shouldn't have any issues with any of your scoring lines or text or anything rubbing off here because they are engraved into this translucent acrylic. You can also see it is translucent, so I can line up my fabric nicely. So if I had a character or something I wanted to try to highlight or avoid, I can do that because this is translucent. That was a very important feature when I was designing this. So set that aside again, and we're gonna get lined up here. So I'm gonna use our 7.5 inch pocket. That's what I did on this other one that I previously made. That's the 7.5 inch pocket size, perfectly there. And it fits great on this hacked bottom bag. So we'll line this up. All of my edges are nice and straight. I am first going to make a centering line. You can choose to draw your line if you would like, but for me, for these purposes, it's totally fine for me to just line this up in half and finger crease it. That'll be plenty for me. So I've got a nice crisp line there now, and I'm gonna use my centering line that runs through all these template slots to make sure that I'm nice and centered. I'm going to put my template on my line here, and then I'm also going to use this straight edge of this pocket to make sure that I am just about this far from the edge and it's nice and straight. So if I'm lined up here and I'm lined up here and my fabric is cut straight, I know my pocket is nice and straight. I'm then gonna take my pen and I'm going to get my pen started there. Trace from one end of this rectangle all the way to the other. Now you're not gonna see this in the end. And by the way, I'm on the wrong side of the fabric. I know, I just realized that might not be as obvious to you guys, but that's the right side. So we're on the wrong side of our fabric. And we're not gonna see this in the end, so it's totally fine for me to draw all over this. So I'm gonna trace both sides of my rectangle to start. And then I'm gonna trace both of these little points of my triangles on either side. So once I've done that, you want to make sure to get, in there as best as you can. If your pen doesn't fit, grab another pen. Some pens have a longer, see if I can get that to focus, a longer ballpoint section here that might be easier. You could even use a mechanical pencil, whatever you like, as long as it's something that doesn't bleed. Okay, so I've traced out my little pocket template there. And you can see I didn't get all the way, to the edge. That's not necessarily important. You want to make sure that you're straight and you want to make sure you get it mostly connected and you know where you're at, but you want to trace out those triangles. The next step is I'm going to take the straight edge of my ruler and I'm going to put it right here in the middle of this point and then right here in the middle of this triangle point. making sure that I'm straight between the two, and I am going to connect one of the points of the triangle to the other point of the triangle. Okay. Lastly, I'm going to take another straight edge and I'm going to go from one triangle point here to the other triangle point, and I'm going to connect it, making a rectangle all the way around. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And you want to make sure these are relatively straight because these are your stitch lines. So in the end, you should be left with your connected three-sided triangles, a full rectangle all the way around, and a line drawn from triangle point to triangle point here in the middle. You see how easy that was? This template literally made this a 20-second job. It was so quick. Versus if I were measuring this out with a ruler, I'd have to find the center, and then I'd have to draw one side to one side, and then draw the whole thing here, and then do a halfway point, and then turn it here to get my perfect triangle. It's a whole thing, and it takes forever. This template, such a time saver. And it takes all the guesswork out. I know I've got the right measurements for a number 3 size zipper. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece that I just drew on the wrong side of the fabric, and I'm going to take my I'm putting it on the shell of my bag. So I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to lay it out in front of me with the right side facing me and right side up. For me, where this pocket goes, this is a 2.5 inch wide ruler, and it is literally perfect for me to line this right up on the side of this particular bag and then go ahead and line this. It puts it in the perfect position where I want it on my bag. So I'm just using that to line it up and make sure that I'm straight. And I am gonna take this piece and line it up right there. And I wanna make sure I've got enough seam allowance for this bag here at the top. So I'm gonna need, about that much, maybe a little more. Right there should be about perfect. Just a little over a 1/2 inch, just a skosh over a 1/2 inch. And I'm just gonna line this up and make sure it's kind of taut on this edge, and this is lined up with the side piece here, and we should be good to go. And I'm also visually gonna look at it here and make sure it's relatively straight. And it's pretty straight, it's good enough. The next thing I'm gonna do is take my pins, and I just like 3 or 4 pins. You can obviously not pin this if you don't want to, and if you are using vinyl for this exterior piece, do not pin because you will put holes through here. I would suggest a small piece of double stick tape that you can peel off after if you need to hold it in place. I prefer to hold this cotton piece in place while I sew with pins, just because then I know my pocket's not gonna shift and be crooked. So what I like to do is tuck one in at the top, one in at the bottom, just both going horizontal for shift, and then same thing with my vertical ways. One over here on the side, and one more fairly close to my pocket, but not so close that I won't be able to sew around. So that'll hold this in place nicely. And then I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'll show you how to sew it. All right, so now that we're sitting at our sewing machine, I'm just simply going to stitch around my rectangle here. I am not going to stitch around any part of the pointy side of the triangle, just the back side. So I'm going to connect using my stitching it out. I'm going to connect the long side, this short side, the other long side, and this short side here of my rectangle. I'm not going to have any seam allowance here because I'm going to literally stitch right on the lines that I made, and that's very important. That way our pocket is the right size to accommodate our number 3 zipper. I am going to use a stitch length of about 2.5 millimeter to 3 millimeter to make sure that my pocket is nice and secure. Anything longer than that, and I tend to have gapping issues and things when I turn it. So 2.5 to 3 millimeter is perfect. Now, I also swapped out to my clear applique foot. It's just a totally clear sewing foot that has an open channel here in the middle. That way I can very clearly see where I need to be right here on these lines, and it's much easier to line up as I go. If you don't have a clear foot, you can use any old sewing machine foot, any type of open foot that's easy to see. But if you don't have a clear foot and they make one for your machine, I highly recommend that you get one. I love my clear foot. I use it all the time. Now we're gonna sew. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end of this because again, it's a pocket, it's heavily used. We want to make sure that it is well in place. All right, you can see that we have sewn around the rectangle here on our piece. Might be a little bit easier to see on the back. So all I did was sew around the outer edges of my rectangle, not the triangles and not the center line connecting the two triangles. For our next part here, we're gonna need a couple of tools. We're gonna need our seam ripper, the seam ripper side of our stiletto and seam ripper combo. And then we're also gonna need a nice sharp pair of scissors. Any pair of scissors will do, just make sure they're nice and sharp. And what we're gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna take our seam ripper and we're gonna poke it on this centered line. We're gonna poke it straight through. And then we're gonna run that seam ripper up a little bit and make a slit just about, 1.5 to 2 inches long, big enough to accommodate your scissors. So I have now made a slit down the middle here. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my very sharp scissors and I'm going to continue to cut that slit all the way up nice and clean. And I'm gonna cut from point to point on the front of this triangle, just meeting the point. I'm gonna snip right there close to it. And I'm gonna do that on the other side as well, continuing my slit all the way. And then the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to cut into the points, the diagonal point of this triangle, and we're gonna trim right here, right up close, all the way into that corner. We're not gonna snip our stitches. That's very important. But we're gonna get as close as we can without clipping those stitches. Okay. We're gonna do that 4 times, 1 for each corner. Again, taking care to get as close in there as possible, not to clip our stitches. If you clip a stitch, that's okay. You can go back over it again, but you really wanna make sure to not clip those stitches. Okay, so now we have clipped. Some people are of the opinion that they like to pull this cotton back and they like to clip or trim some of the material here out of this seam allowance. Right here. They want to trim this out. I personally don't do that. This particular bag in this instance is only interfaced with a little bit of thermolam fusible fleece and a little bit of cotton woven fusible interfacing. So I don't feel the need, and I really like the way it kind of beefs up my pocket, but some people will find this a little bit tough. So if you want to trim this out before turning it, I cannot repeat this enough, stress this enough, I mean, you can clip this stuff back here that's attached to the white foam. Do not, under any circumstances, clip any of this yellow, this piece here on our front that we made our zip pocket, any of it, not any of it along the long sides or the pointy part. If you want to clip and trim, you may clip and trim this piece that's attached to the foam. I typically do not. I can show you, clipping it, but I think I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it because once we press this with our iron, it'll fold back nice and we'll have a nice thick kind of rounded turning point on the edge of our pocket. And then we're gonna top stitch into it, and I find it just stabilizes everything really nicely. But if you need to trim, again, you can trim the fusible fleece portion of this with your main body fabric. Do not trim any of this, not the points, not the edges, none of it, okay? So let's go ahead and press this. So we have our piece here, and we have fully trimmed all of these bits in here, our triangle and our center line. And now we're gonna go ahead and turn this, and we're gonna press it with our iron. This is so much easier to do with a regular iron. I don't even honestly know how you would do it with a heat press. But you could press this in the heat press after you're all done if you wanted to. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our lining and we are going to pull it through that hole, just like that. You can kind of turn this over and you can see that we've pulled it through, and the pretty side of our lining is now facing us, which is correct. And pull that all the way through, and then we're gonna proceed to pull the shorter sides, which can be a little tough. through as well. And we'll just kind of hold them with our fingers a little bit here. Before they're pressed, they can be a bit of a bugger. So this is what I was saying about trimming that foam out. If you're finding that you just can't get this to stay open, you can't get it to sit nice with the foam or the fleece, you can trim just the fleece out. But again, you don't want to trim any of this yellow pocket piece because otherwise then you won't have anything to turn your pocket. So I am going to turn this back to the right side so I can see how it looks. So what we don't want to do is have our yellow sticking out all over the place like this. Okay, not for this inset pocket, because otherwise our zipper would get stuck on here all the time. So the first piece I'm going to go ahead and press out here is this corner. I'm going to start here, and you can kind of finger press it a little bit as you go. That does help. And I'm just going to turn it so that, do you see the difference? On the one side, I have the yellow exposed. On the other side, I see nothing but my main print, and the yellow is tucked all the way around. This is the goal. This is what you're looking for, to have that yellow out of the way and tucked around. So I'm going to take my nice hot iron that's on the cotton setting. If you have vinyl, you cannot do this. You would need a press cloth. Otherwise, you'll melt your vinyl, so keep that in mind. This can be done on vinyl. I have done it, but it is a bit trickier. You'll need a press cloth, and you'll need to turn your heat down and take your time on it. So I have now pressed that one side. I'm going to reach back here, and I'm going to pull my little short triangle side out of the way. And again, see how we're left with just the teensiest little sliver of our yellow there. That's what we're ultimately looking for. So I'm going to rub in there with the tip of my iron really, really good and press that. I'm going to press it really, really good so it stays in there nice. And I'm just going to work my way down the whole pocket, doing the same thing, reaching to the back, pulling my lining. You don't want to distort your pocket. You're still looking for a nice straight rectangle. So keep that in mind. Don't pull so much that you're distorting the pocket. If you press it that way, it can end up distorted in the end. And you want a really nice rectangle. So we'll start on the other side again. I'm kind of holding it in place, straightening everything out as I go, rolling it around back here. There's a little bit of finesse that comes with making these pockets, but honestly, once you get it down, you got it down. It's really not hard. It's just a lot of tedious steps, which is what is really great about the zipper template, because you can't get past some of these steps when you're doing an inset pocket. You've got to do it. So any of the guesswork or any of the other stuff you can take out of it, I am like all for that. Oops. I lost my side. Go back, make sure I pull that corner in really nice, and we'll press that before we lose it again. Another tip about this, and I'm going to use it anyway just because it will help with the overall look of my bag, but if you use a colored zipper that's the same color as the pocket piece that you're using, it kind of hides the whole thing, and it makes it kind of disappear. So if you have some wonky edges on here where you didn't get it quite straight enough, or you just were going too fast and got kind of lazy or couldn't get it perfect, a colored zipper that's the same color as your lining piece underneath here, it'll make that like completely go away. When you have a really high contrast liner to the outside of your bag, it will also make it go away if you get something that blends in with your overall look here as well. So keep that in mind when you're a beginner. It's kind of like contrast stitching. You don't really want to do contrast stitching in the beginning of something when you're new, because you haven't really gotten the technique down nice enough, and you haven't quite got good control over your speed and all that. Your contrast stitching can look really crummy, even though it's not that bad, because errors really stick out really, really, really evident. It's very evident, right? And you don't want to do that. So if you're new and you're not quite super practiced on this, use something that blends. Okay, so now we're left with a beautiful, super crisp trim opening there. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe if I put like a piece of paper behind it. I don't have a piece of paper, but maybe my hand will be enough here. So we're left with a really nice opening. The next thing I'm going to do is grab some double stick tape and my number 3 zipper, and we're going to install that. So now for this portion, I am going to use my number 3 zipper, just your normal zipper. I've got my piece that I just prepared here, and then I also have some double stick tape. The double stick tape is totally optional. You can also choose to pin this zipper. I used to not use double stick tape, but I just find if I use the double stick tape, in the end, I end up with a lot less issues and a lot less pulling and pushing, and I just don't have to worry so much about lining it up. This is extremely thin, like 1/8 of an inch thin double stick tape, and it works great because I want to keep this out of my stitching. My domestic machine doesn't love double stick tape no matter what kind I use. The industrial doesn't care either way, but since we're working on the domestic today, I'm really going to use this thin tape and try my best to keep it out of my seam allowance to keep it from getting gummy. So first thing we're going to do is grab a piece of our tape, and we're going to go just the length of the pocket. So that piece is the length of the pocket. Oops. Super sticky tape. Roll that back on. The other thing is this zipper is a little bit longer than my pocket, and that's totally okay. I'm fine with that. I like to keep my zipper stops when I install these zippers. This is optional. You don't have to, but I like to line my stop up right toward the end, and I'm going to end up using that portion of the zipper. I like to keep the stops because I find it's a little bit nicer than running right into the fabric. The fabric at the bottom, if there's no zipper stop, it can get worn over time. And when it's a heavier use item, I just like to make sure that it lasts as long as possible. So I keep my stop. So I'm going to line this up right there on the edge as close as possible out of the way, making sure not to pull my zipper out of weave as I go. I'm going to zip that back up though so it stays straight. And then I'm just going to push down my double stick tape. For double stick tape, you all know that I really like to use my seam ripper or my stiletto, either way, to get the paper off of the double stick tape because that is just such a pain. Before I pull that off though, I am going to get another piece here, find the end of my zipper or my tape roll. That should be good enough. Peel that off. And that's enough of that. And we'll line this up once again, just right on the edge of my zipper here. Okay, press that down nicely, and then we'll use our stiletto to just gently pick off and separate this paper. Okay, next thing we are going to do, seam ripper aside, we're going to take this to the back side of our pocket. And we're going to frame our zipper. We need to make sure that we've unzipped this enough down here so that our zipper head is within frame. Make sure I stay in frame here so you guys can see what I'm doing. So we're gonna take our pressed pocket and we're gonna frame up our zipper here. I'm gonna align the stop first and just make sure that I keep it relatively centered. And I'm gonna press along the edge as I go and make sure that my fabric stays nicely tucked where I ironed it as I go. Again, there's a little bit of finesse involved with this. You need to make sure that your zipper's not curling around in there, that it's nice and straight. But once we get this all lined up, we're going to stitch it down in place, and then we won't have to worry about that anymore. I'm going to turn it this way, kind of tug on my zipper a little, and line it up. This is all just about, you can pull your double stick tape off, reposition, reposition until you get it perfect. If the zipper doesn't look perfect now, if it's wavy like it is here, it's gonna be wavy later. So reposition it and make sure you are happy before you proceed. If we do all this work and then we have a wavy drunken zipper, that's not fun. Nobody wants a drunken zipper when we can avoid it. Of course it happens to all of us, but if we try, we can pretty much make sure we don't have that. You can kind of massage it around with your fingernails a little bit. Pull our zipper head up there, pull our pocket lining. Just make sure everything is just as perfect as can be. And press. You know, this tape doesn't have a ton of hold. It's not supposed to. This is not what's going to hold our bag together. It's simply just to get it out of the way. And as I was saying, because my zipper matches my lining pretty well, if I have a wonky edge here, it's not going to stick out like crazy like it would if I had a really bright, you know, color that was hugely contrast. And again, because it was a little wonky, I'm going to fix it now so it's perfect later. So that's about perfect lined up for me, frankly. Pull that one last little bit out of there. I like to zip my zipper up all the way and tuck the head right there and just make sure I'm all good to go. I am happy with this. It's perfect. I'm very gently going to relocate this back to my sewing machine, and what we're going to do is top stitch really close using a zipper foot all the way around the edge of our rectangle, taking care to back stitch at the beginning and the end. And that's going to lock our zipper into place. Okay, we're back at the machine and we are going to sew this down. Just to show you what the back side looks like, we have got our zipper nicely placed with our double stick tape on the back of our lining here. So I have chosen my thread here to match the outer portion of this rectangle, which is my all over multicolored fabric here. I did that for a couple of reasons. One, if my top stitching gets a little wonky, nobody's gonna notice. And two, I just don't really like contrast stitching myself, especially in a situation like this where I already have a lot of chaos and color on this fabric and a bright pop of color in my zipper. This bag is gonna have bright red lining and a bright red strap. So I think we've got plenty of color, plenty of character going on here. We don't need to add any more. So what I'm going to do is I actually like to start on the side where the zipper head is. I'm just going to unzip that just a tiny, tiny bit. I've swapped out for that close clearance zipper foot here. And I'm just going to go ahead and start by back stitching where my zipper is here on the side. And I am getting really, really close to the edge of my zipper. That's the whole reason for the zipper foot, is I am getting incredibly close, like my needle is not even a full millimeter away from the edge of this rectangle. And that's the way that I want it, to make sure I have a nice secure zipper and a nice looking end product. So let's go ahead and sew, back stitching at the beginning and then also at the end. All right, look at that beautiful inset zipper. So easy and so quick. I'm going to show you very quickly how to finish off the pocket. Like I said, if you want to learn how to make this bag start to finish, again with this same zipper pocket, now you know how to do the pocket. And we will be doing a tutorial in a different video for this hacked bag with the box bottom, the H20 to go from Linds Handmade Designs, in a separate video, which is linked below. So to finish off this pocket, we're going to go ahead and flip this bad boy over and you can see exactly what we have going on here. We have got our rectangle around our zipper edges. We have got our stop where it needs to be, our zipper head where it needs to be inside the rectangle. I have some extra zipper teeth going on up here, which I'm going to take my very sharp scissors and I'm going to just clip those off right at the edge of my pocket and toss those away. Okay, so I've now clipped my zipper teeth right off, and we're just gonna finish this pocket. If you did yours properly, you should be looking at the back side of your main bag body piece, whatever you're making, and you should be looking at the pretty side of your lining on the back side of that back body piece. So what we will now do is take our fabric and we're just literally gonna fold it right in half. And we're gonna stitch all along the edges here to finish off the edge of our, our pocket. So the two open edges here and the open edge up here all along the top, and then we'll have a finished pocket. I tend to not change out my colors for something like this where no one's gonna see it. You really don't have to, but it's up to you. I'm not going to, and I'm just gonna show you stitching this closed the way that I do it. So I actually am gonna flip to the right side of my project to do this, and then I'm gonna peel back this part just so I can see the edges here. Turn that so you can see it, and I'm gonna line them up. I'm just gonna make sure that corner to corner it matches, and then I'm gonna go ahead and stitch along here with like a 1/4 of an inch, a scant bigger than a 1/4 of an inch, whatever you wanna take here. You can take this full 1/2 inch seam if that makes you feel better. This isn't a big pocket and it won't be carrying a lot of weight in the pocket, so I'm not really concerned. So I'll line this up. I like to stitch along the long side first because it's the one that's most finicky. Get my threads out of the way there. So I'll line up my zipper foot. Back stitching at the corner, of course. And then just make sure this stays aligned all the way down. All right, my pocket is now completely complete. I've sewn all 3 of my sides together, and so it's all nice and finished off. I have my 4th side, which was folded in half, so I didn't have to sew that one. And I've sewn my zipper into place and trimmed all of my tails. So that is how you make an inset pocket for a bag using your number 3 zipper template from emporiumthreads.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video. Bye-bye. Switched out to my zipper foot. Ooh. Ouch, careful. Poke that pin back in there so I don't prick myself again. That was quite painful.